Okay, so picture this. It's the turn of the millennium, the absolute frenzy of the dot-com boom. And right in the middle of it all, the world's biggest automakers did something completely unthinkable. They launched a joint venture, a massive billion-dollar gamble called Covisint. And that's the story we're diving into today.
So, what actually happens when the world's biggest rivals decide to just call a truce? I mean, it's a core question in business, right? But what happens when they don't just stop fighting, but they actually try to build something new together?
Because see, back in the year 2000, this wasn't just some friendly truce. The auto industry was doing this out of sheer desperation. They weren't just shaking hands. They were betting the farm, their entire future, on one single, absolutely radical idea.
To really get why these arch rivals would ever team up, you've got to understand the mess they were in. At the turn of the millennium, the global auto industry was in some serious, serious trouble.
And wow, this chart right here, it really paints a picture. The industry had a staggering 24 million units of excess capacity. That means they could build 24 million more cars than they could actually sell. And because of that, their huge, expensive factories were running at less than 70% capacity. They were just sitting there, increasingly empty.
And that kind of overcapacity, it just creates this brutal domino effect. Prices get hammered down, profit margins get squeezed for everybody, not just the automakers, but all their suppliers too. And it leads to this frantic scramble for survival, with huge mergers like the Daimler-Chrysler deal happening all over the place.
So the pressure was just immense. And out of all that pressure, this truly radical idea started to form. If they couldn't beat each other on their own, maybe, just maybe, they could save themselves by actually working together.
And the crazy part? This whole thing came together at lightning speed. In late 1999, the big three, GM, Ford, and Daimler-Chrysler, were all building their own separate online supply exchanges. But they quickly realized, wait a minute, this is forcing our suppliers to build 3 different systems. It's a hugely inefficient mess. So just 3 months later, they stunned the world by announcing they were merging all their efforts into one single platform.
Now, the official party line was, of course, super optimistic. As the CEO of General Motors put it, this was all about speeding up the benefits of the internet age for the entire industry, a grand vision of shared progress.
And what this whole venture was a massive experiment in this concept called co-opetition. It's this incredibly tricky dance of cooperating with the very same people you are fiercely competing against every other day of the week. And let me tell you, that is way, way harder than it sounds.
So why would they take such a huge, monumental risk? Well, it's simple. The potential reward was just mind-boggling. The financial promise behind Covisint was absolutely astronomical.
$1,064. Just let that number sink in for a second. According to Goldman Sachs at the time, that was the potential cost savings from a more efficient supply chain for every single vehicle produced. In an industry that makes millions of cars, that number is just breathtaking.
But here's what's really interesting, and you can see it right here. Look who stood to gain the most. This wasn't just a power play for the big guys. No, the plan actually promised that the suppliers would save almost double what the manufacturers would, nearly $700 per vehicle. And that was the key to making this attractive to the whole industry. And look, these weren't just numbers plucked out of thin air. They came from real, tangible goals: improving productivity in the factories, reducing waste from mistakes and rework, and using their combined purchasing power to get better deals for everyone. On paper, it was a perfect win-win.
But you know how it goes. A perfect plan on paper almost never survives first contact with the real world. And Covisint was about to run headfirst into a wall of skepticism, distrust, and enormous practical challenges. The gamble was officially on.
This quote from an industry analyst at Forbes, man, it just perfectly captures how everyone on the outside was looking at this. How could 3 companies known for fierce infighting possibly come together and raise a healthy, functional venture? The skepticism was just baked in from day one.
And the problems were, well, they were everywhere. Covisint was basically fighting a war on 5 different fronts. It had antitrust regulators in the US and Europe breathing down its neck. Its own potential customers, the suppliers, were terrified it was just a big club to squeeze their profits. It was burning through an unbelievable $12 million a month, built on tech from 2 warring companies, and it had this fundamentally split personality. Was it a non-profit utility or a for-profit startup?
All right, so you've got this massive promise on one side and this absolute mountain of problems on the other.
So how did Covisint actually do? What was the early verdict on this billion-dollar bet? Well, if you just look at the raw numbers from its first full year, it looks like a home run. I mean, an absolute smash hit. Over 1,000 online auction events, an incredible $45 billion in transaction volume, more than 2,600 companies registered and using the system. By all those metrics, the platform was undeniably buzzing with activity. But this is where you get this huge disconnect between the inside and the outside view. Internally, the CEO was preaching patience, framing Covisint as the future dial tone for the entire industry, saying revolutionary change just takes time. But on the outside, analysts were just brutal, calling it floundering, and saying it had no hope of ever living up to its impossible hype.
And so that leaves us with the big central question, right? Was Covisint a truly revolutionary idea that was just too far ahead of its time, or was it a fatally flawed, overhyped gamble from the very start? You know, it's a powerful reminder that in these huge, high-stakes innovations, the line between visionary success and spectacular failure is often impossible to see until you're looking at it in the rearview mirror.